Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today I have two watches in front of me, two GMT watches from two very well-respected brands that are priced around the same price point but are vastly different in terms of what they offer. So let's go ahead and walk through some of the differences between the Grand Seiko SBGN003 and the Tudor Black Bay GMT. Quick wristwatch check. I am wearing my 126710 BLNR on the Oyster bracelet in the spirit of reviewing these GMT watches. So let's go through the Grand Seiko first. Now the Grand Seiko is a 39mm watch in diameter, 12.1mm thick. The lug to lug is 46mm. It has a 19mm lug width with about a 1mm taper, so tapers down to 18mm. And you can see it has a twin deployant double trigger release clasp. So very secure, and the clasp itself is very small but does not have any micro adjust, which is one downside of the clasp. And then you can see that the case back has the Grand Seiko sort of lion emblem there as well, which looks very solid, very sharp. And then you can see that there are actually drilled lugs on the case side, so it makes it very easy to change straps. There's actually AR coating on the underside of this crystal as well, so it makes the watch very legible. There's Lumabrite that is applied on the hands and indices, kind of glows in this green lume. I will say that that's kind of a weak point of this watch. The lume isn't very generously applied, especially for a sports watch. The indices, as you can see, have very small applications. The hands are kind of the first to go in the dark, which is kind of a disappointment for a sports watch. I think it's definitely an area of improvement for this Grand Seiko and a lot of Grand Seiko watches, in fact. You can see that the top of the lugs are polished, and this is using Grand Seiko's Zaratsu polishing, a very fine and complex finishing process, and just has a very beautiful shine to it. And then the hands are these Grand Seiko, also Zaratsu polished sword style hands, so very sharp looking and very precise. It's very easy to tell at a glance what time it is. In the daytime, at least, I would say that at night, the visibility of this watch kind of goes down a little bit. You can see there's an orange GMT hand here, and this is a true GMT function. So the caliber inside this watch is the 9F86 high accuracy quartz, and it's accurate to plus or minus 10 seconds per year. So an extremely accurate movement powering this watch, and the battery life is about 2 years. You can see there is a stainless steel fixed 24-hour bezel, and this watch has a screw down crown and is water resistant to 100 meters. The watch is thankfully very light and wearable. It comes in at approximately 149 grams, and I found that the wearing experience of this watch to be really great. Let me go ahead and pop it on wrist here and show you guys. So I have a 6.5-inch wrist in circumference, and you can see it wears nice and low and very wearable. I love the 39mm size. I think it is a perfect size for this type of watch. The Rolex Explorer 2, which I think this watch, we can all agree that this watch definitely draws some very heavy inspiration from, is a massive 42mm. So I think in some ways this watch actually does the Explorer 2 design ethos, ironically, with more grace and more vintage charm, and is a little bit more true to the proportions of the classic Rolex Explorer 2 reference 1655. So that's kind of something really interesting to note. You can see that there is a black and white color differential on the inside track of the dial to differentiate between daytime and nighttime hours. So let's go ahead and set this one aside and take a look at the Tudor Black Bay GMT. Now this is another solid watch, and it's a solid offering from the Rolex Tudor family. This watch is 41mm in diameter, definitely a lot more thick than the Grand Seiko at 14.6 mil thick, but it does have a slightly more domed crystal compared to the Grand Seiko. 22mm lug width, on this rivet style bracelet and tapers to 18 millimeters. It's 50 millimeters lug to lug, so it's very wearable in that regard. It's not going to take up too much wrist real estate, and you can see that there's some fine chamfering on the bottom of the case to kind of help aid with its wearability. There is a fold over safety clasp with ceramic ball bearings, as you can see there, so very secure and easy to operate. Nice milled clasp there, and you do get some micro adjust versus the Grand Seiko. Plain case back, and has basically just manufactured Tudor GMT on the outside perimeter of the case back. No drilled lugs, which is kind of a shame to see. Would have been nice to see this watch offer drilled lugs, since it does draw design inspiration from, you know, vintage Rolexes, and would have been cool to be able to effortlessly change this watch from bracelet to strap and vice versa. Screw down crown, and this watch is actually water resistant to 200 meters, so it's kind of a dive style GMT watch. The bezel is 48 click, and it's bi-directional rotating bezel. Not the easiest bezel or GMT bezel to turn in the world. I think the GMT Master 2 definitely has a better grip versus this one. But if you've owned and operated the Black Bay 58, this bezel action should be very familiar to you. So it's not too hard to turn, grip and turn, but it is one area of improvement of this watch, along with the thickness, in my opinion. It features a very bright green loom, and that's definitely a strong point of this watch. It's extremely legible in low light situations. Personally, I love to see that visibility in the dark, and so that would kind of tip me towards choosing this watch over the Grand Seiko, just on merits of that alone. This does have some AR coating as well on the inside of the crystal, so as you can see, it kind of helps aid in the visibility and reduce glare from the crystal. You can see there's some nice beveling on the case there as well, evoking that vintage aesthetic. So this watch does have a true GMT function as well. It's the Tudor in-house MT5652, which has 70 hours of power reserve, beats at 4 Hertz, is COSC certified. And you can see that this has a red GMT hand. The hands of this watch feature Tudor's signature snowflake design and are very bold and legible. The weight of this watch is approximately 200 grams, so it's definitely a much chunkier and much heftier watch versus the Grand Seiko at 149 grams. And you can see that the dial here is actually a matte dial versus the lacquer dial on the Grand Seiko. So let's go ahead and get this watch on wrist. And you can see, despite the objective case thickness and the weight of this watch, because of that nice chamfering on the underside of the case, the watch does hug my wrist very well. And because of the fact that these bracelet end links don't protrude out, they just go straight down, it definitely aids in the overall wearability of this watch. When it comes to price, the Grand Seiko is priced at $3,200. Black Bay GMT is priced at $4,050 on the bracelet, or $37.25 on a NATO or leather strap. So these two watches are definitely in the same ballpark when it comes to price. And when it comes to finishing, I think the Grand Seiko really can't be beat. But there are strong points of the Tudor GMT. The fact that it does have excellent loom, it does have a bi-directional rotating bezel. If you prefer a smaller watch, I would say definitely go for the Grand Seiko. It's just much more light and much more wearable on wrist. I would also say that the Tudor Black Bay GMT is a lot more bold, it's a lot more eye-catching due to that Pepsi bezel. So if you're looking for something a little bit more understated, and actually surprisingly has some Rolex DNA design ethos in it, the Grand Seiko is a solid choice. I haven't tried either of these watches on straps, but I think both of them are pretty versatile. They'll fit with any strap, and then they'll also look pretty good with pretty much any type of outfit. I would say the Grand Seiko is a little bit more versatile when it comes to that, because it doesn't have as many dramatic colors and it's a little bit smaller in proportion. I would say the Tudor Black Bay GMT definitely would not dress up as well as the Grand Seiko. For me personally, if I had to choose between one of these, I would still go for the Tudor Black Bay GMT, simply on the merits of the fact that it's a lot more legible. The watch purist nerd in me definitely respects the 9F86 quartz caliber, which is why I picked up this watch in the first place. But I still kind of like the charm and the engineering that goes behind a mechanical automatic movement. I'm still kind of coming to grips with the fact that it's definitely a lot more thick and a lot less wearable on wrist versus the Grand Seiko. But overall, I think Tudor, because of the improved legibility, because of the fact that I personally really love this Pepsi design as well. I think it's a very timeless and classic design that's going to age very well. And I would say as a brand, Tudor Rolex has a little bit more of, you know, brand provenance and cachet versus Grand Seiko, at least when it comes to non-watch enthusiasts. I don't purchase watches to impress other people, but if you are trying to purchase a watch that is a little bit more recognizable, I would say go for the Tudor Black Bay GMT. And if you just purely appreciate horology for what it is, if you appreciate the fine detailing and finishing and a lot of the rich history that Grand Seiko and Seiko has as well, you know, you can't go wrong with the Grand Seiko. I would say that these two can absolutely coexist in the same collection. I personally love GMT watches. I love the convenience and functionality of the independent jump hour. And I think that these two watches are different enough and unique enough in their identities and design language to coexist in a well-balanced watch collection. So hopefully this review gives you a good idea of these two very solid GMT watches from Grand Seiko and Tudor. I hope you found this review helpful and informative. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. And thanks again for tuning in, guys. I will catch you in the next one. Take care.